Welcome to Snoozecast, the podcast designed to help you fall asleep. Find us on snoozecast.com and follow us on Instagram at snoozecast to find behind-the-scenes content. If you'd like to get an email once a week with upcoming sleep stories and other news, subscribe to this newsletter at snoozecast.com. This episode is brought to you by Quince Marmalade. Tonight, we'll read all about old-fashioned puddings from the White House Cookbook, written by the House Stewards in Washington, D.C., and published in 1887. The original pudding was formed by mixing various ingredients with a grain product or other binder, such as butter, flour, cereal, eggs, and or suet, resulting in a solid mass. These puddings are baked, steamed, or boiled. Depending on the ingredients, such a pudding may be served as a part of the main course or as dessert. Christmas pudding is a type of pudding traditionally served as part of the Christmas dinner in Britain and certain British-influenced cultures. Despite the name of plum pudding, that particular pudding contains no actual plums due to the pre-Victorian use of the word plums as a term for raisins. Let's get cozy. Close your eyes. Relax your body into the softness of your bed. Now, take a few deep breaths. To make a good pudding, it depends as much upon the judgment of the cook as on the materials used. Everything should be the best in the way of materials, and a proper attention to the rules, with some practice, will ensure success. Puddings are either boiled, baked, or steamed. If boiled, the materials should be well worked together. Put in a thick cloth bag, previously dipped in hot water, wringing it slightly and dredging the inside thickly with flour. Tie it firmly, allowing room for it to swell. Drop it into a kettle of boiling water, with a small plate or saucer in the bottom of it to keep it from sticking to the kettle. It should not cease boiling one moment from the time it is put in until it is taken out, and the pot must be kept tightly covered, and the cover not removed except when necessary to add water from the boiling tea kettle when the water is getting low. When done, dip immediately in cold water and turn out. This should be done just before placing on the table. Or, butter a tin pudding mold or earthen bowl. Close it tight so that water cannot penetrate. Drop it into boiling water and boil steadily the required time. If a bowl is used, it should be well buttered and not quite filled with the pudding, allowing room for it to swell. Then, a cloth wet in hot water, slightly wringing it, then floured on the inner side and tied over the bowl, meeting under the bottom. To steam a pudding, put it into a tin pan or earthen dish. Tie a cloth over the top, first dredging it in flour, and set it in a steamer. Cover the steamer closely, allow a little longer time than you do for boiling. Molds or basins for baking, steaming, or boiling should be well buttered before the mixture is put into them. Allow a little longer time for steaming than for boiling. Batter puddings should be smoothly mixed and free from lumps. To ensure this, first mix the flour with a very small portion of milk, the yolks of the eggs, and the sugar thoroughly beaten together, and added to this. Then, add the remainder of the milk by degrees. Then, the seasoning. Then the beaten whites of eggs last. Much success in making this kind of pudding depends upon a strict observance of this rule, for, although the materials may be good, if the eggs are put into the milk before they are mixed with the flour, there will be a custard at the top and a soft dough at the bottom of your dish. All sweet puddings require a little salt to prevent insipidity and to draw out the flavor of the several ingredients, but a grain too much will spoil any pudding. In puddings where wine, brandy, cider, lemon juice, or any acid is used, it should be stirred in last and gradually, or it is apt to curdle the milk or eggs. In making custard puddings, puddings made with eggs and milk, the yolks of the eggs and sugar should be thoroughly beaten before any of the milk or seasoning is added, and the beaten whites of eggs last. In making puddings of bread, rice, tapioca, etc., the eggs should be beaten very light and mixed with a portion of the milk before adding them to the other ingredients. If the eggs are mixed with the milk without having been thus beaten, the milk will be absorbed by the bread, rice, tapioca, etc., without rendering them light. The freshness of all pudding ingredients is of much importance, as one bad article will taint the whole mixture. When the freshness of eggs is doubtful, break each one separately in a cup before mixing them all together. Should there be a bad one amongst them, it can be thrown away, whereas, if mixed with the good ones, the entire quantity would be spoiled. The yolks and whites beaten separately make the articles they are put into much lighter. Raisins and dried fruit for puddings should be carefully picked and, in many cases, stoned. Currants should be well washed, pressed in a cloth, and placed on a dish before the fire to get thoroughly dry. They should be then picked carefully over, and every piece of grit or stone removed from amongst them. To plump them, some cooks pour boiling water over them and then dry them before the fire. Many baked pudding recipes are quite as good boiled. As a safe rule, boil the pudding twice as long as you would bake it, and remember that a boiling pudding should never be touched after it is once put on the stove. A jar of the kettle destroys the lightness of the pudding. If the water boils down and more must be added, it must be done so carefully that the mold will not hit the side of the kettle, and it must not be allowed to stop boiling for an instant. Batter should never stick to the knife when it is sent to the table. It will do this both when less than sufficient number of eggs is mixed with it and when it is not cooked enough. About 4 eggs to the half-pound of flour will make it firm enough to cut smoothly. When baked or boiled puddings are sufficiently solid, turn them out of the dish they were baked in, bottom uppermost, and strew over them finely sifted sugar. When pastry or baked puddings are not done through, and yet the outside is sufficiently brown, cover them over with a piece of white paper until thoroughly cooked. This prevents them from getting burnt. Recipes: English plum pudding, the genuine. Soak 1 pound of stale bread in a pint of hot milk and let it stand and cool. When cold, add to it 1/2 pound of sugar and the yolks of 8 eggs beaten to a cream, 1 pound of raisins, stoned and floured, 1 pound of currants, washed and floured, 1/4 pound of citron cut in slips and dredged with flour, 1 pound of beef suet chopped fine and salted, 1 glass of wine, 1 glass of brandy, 1 nutmeg, and a tablespoonful of mace, cinnamon, and cloves mixed. Beat the whole well together and, as the last thing, add the whites of the 8 eggs, beaten to a stiff froth. Pour into a cloth previously scalded and dredged with flour. Tie it firmly, leaving room for the pudding to swell and boil 6 hours. Serve with wine or brandy sauce. It is best to prepare the ingredients the day before and cover closely. Christmas plum pudding by measure. 1 cupful of finely chopped beef suet, 2 cupfuls of fine breadcrumbs, 1 heaping cupful of sugar, 1 cupful of seeded raisins, 1 cupful of well-washed currants, 1 cupful of chopped blanched almonds, 1/2 cupful of citron, sliced thin, a teaspoonful of salt, 1 of cloves, 2 of cinnamon, 1/2 a grated nutmeg, and 4 well-beaten eggs. Dissolve a level teaspoonful of soda in a tablespoonful of warm water. Flour the fruit thoroughly from a pint of flour. Then mix the remainder as follows. In a large bowl, put the well-beaten eggs, sugar, spices, and salt in 1 cupful of milk. Stir in the fruit, chopped nuts, breadcrumbs, and suet, one after the other, until all are used, putting in the dissolved soda last, and adding enough flour to make the fruit stick together, which will take all the pint. Boil or steam 4 hours. Serve with wine or brandy or any well-flavored sauce. Baked plum pudding. It will be best found to prepare the ingredients the day before and cover closely. Grate a loaf of stale bread, or enough for a pint of crumbs. Boil 1 quart of milk and turn boiling hot over the grated bread. Cover and let steep an hour. In the meantime, pick, soak, and dry 1/2 pound of currants, 1/2 pound of raisins, 1/4 pound of citron cut in large slips, 1 nutmeg, 1 tablespoonful of mace and cinnamon mixed, 1 cupful of sugar, with 1/2 cupful of butter. When the bread is ready, mix with it the butter, sugar, spice, and citron, adding a glassful of white wine. Beat 8 eggs very light, and when the mixture is quite cold, stir them gradually in. Then add by degrees the raisins and currants dredged with flour. Stir the whole very hard. Put it into a buttered dish. Bake 2 hours. Send to the table warm. Eat with wine sauce or wine and sugar. Most excellent. Plum pudding without eggs. This delicious light pudding is made by stirring thoroughly together the following ingredients: 1 cupful of finely chopped beef suet, 2 cupfuls of fine breadcrumbs, 1 cupful of molasses, 1 of chopped raisins, 1 of well-washed currants, 1 spoonful of salt, 1 teaspoonful each of cloves, cinnamon, allspice, and carbonate of soda, 1 cupful of milk, and flour enough to make a stiff batter. Put into a well-greased pudding mold or a 3-quart pail and cover closely. Set this pail into a larger kettle, close covered, and half full of boiling water, adding boiling water as it boils away. Steam not less than 4 hours. This pudding is sure to be a success and is quite rich for one containing neither eggs nor butter. 1/2 of the above amount is more than 8 persons would be able to eat, but it is equally good some days later, steamed again for an hour, if kept closed covered meantime. Serve with wine sauce or common sweet sauce. Almond pudding. Turn boiling water on to 3/4 pound of sweet almonds. Let it remain until the skin comes off easily. Rub with a dry cloth. When dry, pound fine with 1 large spoonful of rose water. Beat 6 eggs to a stiff froth with 3 spoonfuls of fine white sugar. Mix with 1 quart of milk, 3 spoonfuls of pounded crackers, 4 ounces of melted butter, and the same of citron cut into bits. Add almonds, stir together, and bake in a small pudding dish with a lining and rim of pastry. This pudding is best when cold. It will bake in half an hour in a quick oven. Apple pudding, baked. Stir 2 tablespoonfuls of butter and 1/2 cupful of sugar to a cream. Stir into this the yolks of 4 eggs, well beaten, the juice and grated rind of 1 lemon, and half a dozen sound green tart grated. Now stir in the 4 beaten whites of the eggs. Season with cinnamon or nutmeg. Bake. To be served cold with cream. Boiled apple pudding. Take 3 eggs, 3 apples, 1/4 pound of breadcrumbs, 1 lemon, 3 ounces of sugar, 3 ounces of currants, half a wine glassful of wine, nutmeg, butter, and sugar for sauce. Pare, core, and mince the apples and mix with the breadcrumbs, nutmeg, grated sugar, and currants. The juice of the lemon and half the rind grated. Beat the eggs well. Moisten the mixture with these and beat all together, adding the wine last. Put the pudding in a buttered mold. Tie it down with a cloth. Boil 1 hour and a half and serve with sweet sauce. Bird's nest pudding. Core and peel 8 apples. Put in a dish. Fill the places from which the cores have been taken with sugar and a little grated nutmeg. Cover and bake. Beat the yolks of 4 eggs light. Add 2 teacupfuls of flour with 3 even teaspoonfuls of baking powder sifted with it, 1 pint of milk with a teaspoonful of salt. Then add the whites of the eggs well beaten. Pour over the apples and bake 1 hour in a moderate oven. Serve with sauce. Bread and butter pudding. Butter the sides and bottom of a deep pudding dish. Then butter thin slices of bread. Sprinkle thickly with sugar, a little cinnamon, chopped apple, or any fruit you prefer between each slice, until your dish is full. Beat up 2 eggs. Add a tablespoonful of sifted flour. Stir with the 3 cupfuls of milk and a little salt. Pour over this the bread. Let it stand 1 hour, and then bake slowly with the cover on 3/4 of an hour. Then take the cover off and brown. Serve with wine and lemon sauce. Pie plant, cut up in small pieces with plenty of sugar, is fine made in this manner. Cold berry pudding. Take rather stale bread, baker's bread or light homemade, cut in thin slices, and spread with butter. Add a very little water and a little sugar to 1 quart or more of huckleberries and blackberries, or the former alone. Stew a few minutes until juicy. Put a layer of buttered bread in your buttered pudding dish. Then a layer of stewed berries while hot, and so on until full. Lastly, a covering of stewed berries. It may be improved with a rather soft frosting over the top. To be eaten cold with thick cream and sugar. Apple Tapioca Pudding. Put 1 teacupful of tapioca and 1 teaspoonful of salt into 1.5 pints of water, and let it stand several hours where it will be quite warm but not cook. Peel 6 tart apples. Take out the cores. Fill them with sugar, in which is grated a little nutmeg and lemon peel, and put them in a pudding dish. Over these, pour the tapioca, first mixing it with 1 teaspoonful of melted butter and a cupful of cold milk and half a cupful of sugar. Bake 1 hour. Eat with sauce. When fresh fruits are in season, this pudding is exceedingly nice with plums, red currants, gooseberries, or apples. Canned or fresh peaches may be used in place of apples in the same manner, moistening the tapioca with the juice of the canned peaches in place of the cold milk. Very nice when quite cool to serve with sugar and cream. Apple and brown bread pudding. Take a pint of brown breadcrumbs, a pint bowl of chopped apples, mix, add 2/3 of a cupful of finely chopped suet, a cupful of raisins, 1 egg, a tablespoonful of flour, half a teaspoonful of salt. Mix with half a pint of milk. Boil in buttered molds about 2 hours. Serve with sauce, flavored with lemon. Superior bread puddings. 1 1/2 cupfuls of white sugar, 2 cupfuls of fine dry breadcrumbs, 5 eggs, 1 tablespoon of butter, vanilla, rosewater, or lemon flavoring, 1 quart of fresh, rich milk, and half a cupful of jelly or jam. Rub the butter into a cupful of sugar, beat the yolks very light, and stir these together to a cream. The breadcrumbs soaked in milk come next, then the flavoring. Bake in a buttered pudding dish, a large one and but 2/3 full, until the custard is set. Draw to the mouth of the oven. Spread over with jam or other nice fruit conserve. Cover this with a meringue made of the whipped whites and half a cupful of sugar. Shut the oven and bake until the meringue begins to color. Eat cold with cream. In strawberry season, substitute a pint of fresh fruit for preserves. It is then delicious. Serve with any warm sauce. Custard pudding. Take 5 tablespoonfuls out of a quart of cream or rich milk and mix them with 2 large spoonfuls of fine flour. Set the rest of the milk to boil, flavoring it with bitter almonds broken up. When it has boiled hard, take it off, strain it, and stir it in the cold milk and flour. Set it away to cool and beat well 8 egg yolks and 4 whites of eggs. Add them to the milk and stir in, at the last, a glass of brandy or white wine, a teaspoonful of powdered nutmeg, and half a cupful of sugar. Butter a large bowl. Pour in the mixture. Tie a cloth tightly over it. Put it into a pot of boiling water and boil it 2 hours, replenishing the pot with hot water from a tea kettle. When the pudding is done, let it get cool before you turn it out. Eat it with butter and sugar stirred together to a cream and flavored with lemon juice or orange.